including this church, including our, I don't care. The church is intended to be a place not only for the community, but it's supposed to be a place of a community. A place where wealth is shared. A place where when one suffers, everyone suffers. You ought to be able to come to a church, I don't care where it is, this one or any other one that you regularly attend or one that you visit, and if you're going through a problem, you ought to be able to share it with that church and them feel and empathize as well as sympathize with what you're doing. It ought to be a place where everyone experiences love, real love, and acceptance in the midst of our honesty of brokenness. Yet most of the time, I'm afraid that churches don't even come close to being able to be described that way. I read a sign, a church sign, just this last week. By the way, anybody read our sign this morning? Anybody that did not happen to glance when you came in? Just real quick. Somebody did? Okay. Honk if you love Jesus. Text while driving if you'd like to meet him. Thank you, Sister Sherry. But this is what I read on church sign this week. A church is for the sick, not a club for the saints. Ouch. A church is for the sick, the sin sick, those that have troubles in their lives, those that have problems they're going through day by day. It's not a place for Christians. It's not a club for saints to come and just have fun and fellowship and eat once a month and tell everybody it's good to see you and we'll come and sing and eat. May I share an old story with you? Some of the regulars have heard this story again, so just bear with me. Reminds me of another story years and years ago where a boat was shipwrecked off the shore. A couple of guys ran out in their boats and rescued people in the boat. Brought them back to shore and they got talking about it and they decided that was a pretty good thing to do. So they formed a life-saving station in that area. Got others to join their life-saving station. Began to keep a watch out on the shore, and after months and months, had saved several people. And after a while, the life-saving station kept getting larger and larger. More people were coming in. They started adding a few luxuries to the life-saving station, make it a little more comfortable. Had air conditioning in the life-saving station. Even put a TV in. And it wasn't long before it became a place where people joined the life-saving station so they could have a club. And they were enjoying their club so much that after a while, people were shipwrecking off the coast, but they didn't have time to go and get them because they were enjoying their club. Sounds like some churches, I know. The purpose of the church is to save those that are lost and dying. It's not a club for the saints where we come, and I said, and minister, just have a fellowship, a good time, and go home. It's to save those that are sick. Without the Spirit of God in our midst, without the Spirit of God working in us, without Him guiding us and living in us and loving through us, we will never be the kind of people that God intended for us to be. There's no such thing as a real church without the Spirit of God in the church. It's just not possible. It's Just not possible. But what is possible is that we can individually and corporately quench and hinder the Spirit of God from working in our lives and in our church. That is possible. I think that it's more important. It's important to talk about Jesus. Don't get me wrong. Very important. But it's more important that we know the Jesus that we're talking about. Agree? I mean, you can go to the library or to the bookstore or on the internet and you can order all the books you want to about Jesus. And you can learn everything there is about Jesus to learn. That's good. But it's nowhere near as important as learning to know Jesus. You got to know who the one you're reading about and studying about. I don't know about you, but maybe I'm just preaching to myself this morning. And that's okay because I need to. I'll take that away in a minute, brother. Because we do, I do. But I want to be Jesus to people. I want to be Jesus to people. I don't want to just talk about the Holy Spirit and God in my life. I want to experience His presence in my life in an overwhelming way. Amen. Let me give you an example of what I mean. In Acts, the 2nd chapter, most of us are familiar with that. Amen. But in the 2nd chapter, I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'll read the first 4 verses, then I'm going to read verses 16, 17, and then 42 and 47. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there was a sound from heaven like a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now verses 16 and 17. But this is that which was spoken through the prophet Joel. Now Peter they've accused people of being drunk and all this, but Peter stands up and says, these people aren't drunk, as we said in verse 15. Verse 16, for this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. Joel prophesied this hundreds of years ago, he said, and it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out of my Spirit upon all flesh, and on your sons and your daughters they shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And then down to verse 42. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread and in prayer. This is those that were saved that day. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all that believed were together and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to men and every man had need. And they continued daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from the house to house. They did eat their food with gladness and singing of the heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily as should be saved. When I read the book of Acts, I see the church as an unstoppable force. In other words, nothing can hinder them from what they were doing and from what God wanted them to do. The church was powerful and it was spreading like wildfire, if you will. Not because of some intelligent planning that anybody had done in there, but by the moving of God's Spirit. It didn't matter if there were riots, it didn't matter if there was torture, it didn't matter if there was imprisonment, anything else that was going on, it did not stop. Isn't that the type of church movement that we should want today? So much of what we see in churches today is anything but unstoppable. Churches that are built by our own efforts and not on the strength of the Spirit will soon collapse. You know, so many times we ask doing. But when I read the book of Acts, I see it the other way around. I see people being privileged or having the privilege of being a part of what God is doing. Instead of saying, God, come on and join in what I'm doing, maybe we'll just get on board and get on board with what He's doing. We need to pray that God would build this kind of church, an unstoppable force, empowered and sustained by the Spirit of God. You see, if the only reason we're coming to church is to hear what the preacher's got to preach, or hear who's going to sing a special, or see what so-and-so is wearing, or anything else you want to add to it, if that's why we're coming to church, we're missing the boat. We're missing the reason why we ought to be coming. May we get to the place where the only reason we come to church is because we want to see what God's going to do. Amen. I don't care what the preacher preaches today. I don't care if he stumbles and makes so many mistakes that I can't keep up with what's going on. I don't care if Sister Donna or Pat or the Henry's family or anybody else sings or doesn't sing. I don't care if the children come and sing or don't sing. That's okay. What I want to do is I want to come and see what God's going to do today. We need to get to the place where we allow God to move so much in our lives and so much in our churches that we're afraid to miss because we've got so much curiosity. We're afraid we're going to miss out on something. That's good curiosity. I don't want to miss out on what you're doing, God, so let me come. May we get to that place. No matter where we live or what our day looks like, we have the choice each day to depend on ourselves, to live that day safely, and try to control our lives the best we can. Or we can live as though we were created to be the temple of the Holy Spirit where He resides and totally dependent on Him, desperate for Him to show up and make a difference in our lives. We have that choice every day. We have that choice every day. And when we begin to live a life that's characterized by walking in His Spirit, that's when people will begin to look not at us, but as our Father who lives in us and who's given us a place in heaven to be with Him. And then He will receive the praise. You know, I, like most pastors, at the end of the service, go to the, tell your perspective, the back of the church or the front of the church. And I'll go to the door, and it's a way of me greeting you. I'm not there for you to shake my hand and tell you how much you enjoyed the service, and I want you to lie in church. That's not what it's about, but it's a way for me to greet you and let you know that I care about you, I really appreciate you being here, and that you're loved and want you to come back. And occasionally I'll have people tell me that was a good message, and that's okay, I appreciate that. But I want you to appreciate being in God's presence more than I want you to be able to appreciate what I preached to you. Too often we talk about truth instead of applying it to our lives. Goes along with what I just shared. We hear a sermon, and we even may discuss it at lunch with our fellow Christians, and how good or how powerful it was, and never think about that message again. If I was to give my regulars in here a test and say, tell me what I preached on, just give me the subject, not the content, but give me the subject of the last 4 messages, I'd have some oh me's. And oh my's. See, that's what happened. We hear a message, and whether we think it's good, whether it is or not, doesn't matter. We never think about it again. We have to understand that God is speaking to us, trying to apply it to our lives so that we can be more like Him. That's the purpose. That's the purpose. We need to allow the Holy Spirit to change us through the message.